Hello, my name is Zachary Hanlon, and the following presentation is my submission for the third assessment in Unit ALL 102, From Horror to Romance, Genre and its Revisions. For this multimedia submission, I have chosen to discuss the genre of Gothic romance, and in doing so, will explore a well-known classic of the genre, as well as a more modern adaptation of this specific type of romance. First, of course, we must discuss what exactly Gothic romance is. This exact thought is a large focus in Joanna Russ's work To Write Like a Woman, Essays in Feminism and Science Fiction. Most specifically, the chapter focusing on modern Gothics from pages 94 to 119. Russ proposes that modern Gothics, referring to the Gothic romances of today, are a direct expression of the traditional middle-class feminine situation. Russ states that these texts provide the kind of escape reading a middle-class believer in the feminine mystique needs, without providing elements that would jeopardize this feminine mystique or otherwise make it seem immoral. Russ, before this point in the chapter, lays out for her readers a large set of characters, events, and objects that are in each and every modern Gothic. There is always a house, generally one extravagant enough to have a name. There is a heroine who is often attractive, but she never knows this. In most cases, she has spent most of her life in grief or sorrow with a member of her family. After some time, this heroine will come to meet an older man, the supermale, who seems to embody to some extent a sort of toxic masculinity, and the heroine finds herself simultaneously loving and hating him. Russ goes on to describe the introduction of the other woman, who comes in as some form of opposition to the heroine then becoming aware of the existence of a buried ominous secret, followed by extensive pathetic fallacy, ominous dialogue, and the secret is revealed. And finally, there is introduced a shadow male, who is more of a kindly man who earnestly cares for the heroine. This all summarizes one of Russ's key arguments, which attempts to pin down the characteristics one is certain to find in any modern Gothic. Now, Charlotte Bronte's classic novel Jane Eyre can only be called a progenitor to the genre of Gothic romance. Because of this, it will inevitably fulfill many of the characteristics explained by Russ, as it was this novel which exemplified and helped to popularize these characteristics in the first place. By looking at the number of aspects that are the same between Russ's analysis of Gothic romance and Jane Eyre, we can then see whether Russ may be correct. We certainly are given the house, initially with Jane's life among the reeds, but are later introduced to Thornfield, which fulfills that role for the rest of the novel. Jane is evidently our heroine, and has been through a sufficient amount of strife as a result of the death of her parents and uncle, as well as the treatment subjected to her by her aunt and cousins. By Rochester's reactions to her, we see that she is indeed attractive. Rochester is our initial supermale, to be replaced eventually by St. John, as Rochester transfers into the role of shadow male. The other woman, now taking the form of Blanche Ingram, and in Bertha Mason, who also embodies the buried ominous secret, all of which is surrounded by dialogue and pathetic fallacy which continue throughout the novel to forebode dark events. It is evident that Jane Eyre's role is also explored through the traditional middle-class feminine situation, wherein she is constantly considering marriages and her status as a poor orphan, and how these things will affect the people around her. The story in general is an escape for those interested in the middle-class feminine mystique, which is emphasized by the popularity of the novel and of the different adaptations to be made in the future, such as the film Jane Eyre. Not only this, but Jane Eyre also exemplifies that Gothic aspect of this genre, with many bizarre, seemingly supernatural events continually happening throughout the novel, beginning with the Red Room, shadowed by dark environments, Gothic architecture, and tragic deaths and events. It is through all this, and the long-lasting popularity of the story, that it can be seen that these characteristics described by Russ are indeed the core elements needed for a modern Gothic or Gothic romance story. The Fulbright Company's story exploration video game called Gone Home was released in August of 2013. This game is simple mechanics, a first-person narrative where the player must simply point and click objects in the game in order to interact with them, often initiating video clips and voice clips from characters within the game, but never actually interacting with any other characters. It is evident that the game can be placed in the category of Gothic romance. However, it introduces several new ideas to the genre. The main love story of the game is between two women who are not of mature age, as is the norm for Gothic romances, and do not display traditionally feminine roles, with no specific reference to their class or status. In accordance to the elements described by Russ, however, the game still sticks closely to the traditional layout for a Gothic romance story. We have the house in One Arbor, we have a heroine in the form of mostly Sam rather than the person we are playing as, Katie, and after some investigation to clues around the house, we can see the difficulties Sam may have had to face in terms of family expectations. The supermale takes the form of their dad, and at times characters such as the dad's boss or Oscar Mason, the other woman in the form of their mother, and the shadow male in the form of a female, with Lonnie. The romantic relationship between Lonnie and Sam is built up throughout the story, and the buried ominous secret ends up being the fact that they have run away together, rather than the consistently implied event of a ghostly possession. While this story does not stick to many of the trends of Gothic romance, it can still tightly coincide with the elements described by Russ. It is evident also that these elements are a popular part of the Gothic romance genre by the fact that this genre is still being pushed into new adaptations, even in the form of video games, while still upholding the Gothic elements of dark atmosphere, pathetic fallacy, and the presence of spirits or ghosts. In conclusion, Jane Eyre and Gone Home each support Russ's theories on the core elements of the Gothic romance genre, exemplifying the popularity of these elements even in modern society and in new forms and adaptations. The general survival of this genre owe themselves to the identifying factors that Russ has brought up, pushing the importance of the Gothic romance and addressing the reasons for why it has remained so popular. Thank you for listening. Hello, my name is